Well, I think it's a pretty unfortunate state of affairs that it's have to come to closed door negotiations again, and I think that really really kind of pathetic text has emerged out of these closed door meetings so far that it's really hard to expect a whole lot more to continue to come out of closed door meetings that exclude representatives of the majority world. And really only represent a lot of the interests of some of the bigger countries and really make a lot of the other countries feel excluded here. And I think that could really hamper plans for these to really advance talks and come to some sort of accord among these different countries around the world.
But this is just a proposal, right? I mean, they're calling it a deal, but isn't it just a proposal? The whole.
I think it's preemptive to call it a deal. I mean, yeah, it's a proposal. The news, Obama, press releases, whatever, reporting it as a deal already said and done. But what I'm hearing from negotiators on the inside is that they haven't been consulted about this. What happened to their say on this becoming the deal of the century about climate change? And a lot of it isn't so much a deal as saying, well, we actually are not having a deal. We're going to postpone these decisions until next year, and in the meantime, we'll make some pledges, some voluntary pledges, based on theoretical things. So it's not really even a deal at that. It's just more of a series of wishes.
But aside from the process, what about the content?
Well,
is there anything in there?
The content is based on these pledges. It's based on thin air. There's nothing that links any of the commitments. They're not commitments. They're stated goals of countries to anything legally binding. And I mean, that was what the Kyoto Protocol was all about. So this is kind of like saying, well, we're outside of the Kyoto Protocol right now. We're going to do whatever we want. Make whatever kind of commitments we want. They got rid of the 1990 baselines. So you see countries like Canada and the US committing to 2005, 2006 baselines, which mean very little compared to these 2006 baselines. The other big point is around funding. They established $100 billion funding in theory, but what they actually say in the document is that the countries are going to jointly mobilize to seek $100 billion in funding. So that's their stated goal, which doesn't mean that they commit to providing that funding, and they admit that it could come from any variety of sources, including private and public funding. So once they say it can come from private funding, they let themselves off the hook and they say, well, our industries will pay for that, carbon offsets will pay for that, all these other varieties of alternative mechanisms could pay for that.
So the CDM could be part of the $100 billion?
Conceivably, yeah. I mean, they would consider that to be some sort of private financing.
And how about, are there any implications that you can make out of this deal for tar sands?
I mean, really, using the 2006 baseline for Canada, I mean, it doesn't really commit Canada to a whole lot. I mean, Canada's been using intensity targets in the past. From this one, it seems like they've at least dropped that language, which is a positive step, but what we're hearing is that Canada's been one of the ones opposing any reference to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which would help protect Indigenous peoples' rights. And there's no other language in there about any sort of human rights safeguards in terms of protecting the climate and protecting against some of the projects that they're considering as part of this particularly right programs. So it looks like, with none of these protections in place, without Canada confirming its commitment to any sort of binding treaty, there's no brakes on this train of the tar sands. It seems like we're going to be here for a while. I've been waiting here since about 11. It's about 2.5 hours now when they announced that this group would come back to convene to present the text. And since then, we've just been, various rumors. All of the negotiators themselves have no idea, for the most part, what's going on inside. They're waiting for this selection of negotiators from mostly Canada, US, maybe the European Union, the basic countries, Brazil, South Africa, China, India, to come back to the table and present their plan. And so what's going to happen now is that we're just waiting for that to happen. People are bunkering for the night. We're seeing some negotiators with alcohol around. It's just an atmosphere is just kind of awareness to deal with this tonight, I think, and get this over with. And I think there's still a lot that needs to be really dealt with.
Do you think it'll go on to Saturday, or do you think they'll just drink and get it done?
It's Saturday now. It's
Oh, yeah,
it's 2
yeah.
a.m. in the
That's
morning.
true. That's true.
If they present this within the next few hours, and they can present it by maybe 4 a.m. some people are saying. Who knows how long it'll take to discuss this? I mean, there's a chance that people will just outright say, this is unacceptable. I don't see it being passed as it is with so much disapproval from so many countries. And they might send it back to the negotiating table, or they might just take over the process and say, this can't be something that's negotiated in private and open up to the whole wider body, which, we guarantee that it takes a seriously long time to actually get through. What would be the only, I think, legitimate way of coming up with some kind of progress. The other point is that, there's maybe a few dozen at most representatives of civil society left in this entire process, myself included. They've all been kicked out as a result of a few days ago of the decisions of the higher levels of the UN. There's a few hundred people protesting outside right now, calling shame on Obama and challenging this accord that's been signed, basically presented by Obama before he gets on his private plane and flies back to the U.S. announcing this as some sort of free meaningful deal. These are the real voices that are not being allowed inside of this conference. And we're just trying to do our part, I think, to talk to some of the negotiators and to also communicate what's going on here. Because I think that's really sorely lacking right now. Is any sort of complex presence, any sort of public pressure, any sort of transparency, any sort of legitimacy.
Some people are saying that a bad deal is worse than no deal. How do you feel about that in this case?
In this case, I think that that's probably dead on. I mean, the potential that we were seeing for a bad deal was high. There was a lot of things that were being negotiated and pushed through, especially with this other Copenhagen text that was coming up, the so-called Danish text. This one's being called the Copenhagen Accord, even though I think it's closer to a Washington Accord. The other text was, conceivably a lot worse and had some, a few numbers in there.
Is that the 3 degrees text that you're talking about?
This one was, that was the 3-degree text that the Secretariat was but this latest text, basically says we're going to put off all the decisions, all the major decisions until next year. And give everybody until Mexico, the next conference of the parties, to actually come up with some of these major decisions. And so in that regard, I think it's better to continue trying to negotiate on some of these things that are not really worked out yet, than just to say we're going to ram this process through, present the text on the table, and have everybody sign it and try and pretend like it's a big happy global family. It's clearly not, and that clearly would have not been the goal that we want to see.